Okay.
Now what am I supposed to do? Read?
Well, I'm getting set up.
This is a life story of William and Clara Sanderson. Is that right?
Well, you can start there. Yeah. Well, first of all, when's your birthday?
My birthday?
Yeah.
January 21, 1918.
So you're going to be 98 next birthday.
I was 98 last January.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, why don't you, let's first of all, where were you born at?
Thetford, Nebraska, at my father's aunt and uncles, Jim and Gertie Sanderson.
How many brothers did Grandpa have?
3. I'm not sure. One of them was Grandpa Bill, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, he had
Art and Ed.
Art and Ed and Roy, 3.
Okay, so who was Jim? Was that your grandpa's brother?
That was Dad's
Uncle.
uncle.
So that was his dad.
Jim and Gertie was a brother to Grandpa Sanderson. Jim Sanderson. And I was born in their home in Thetford, Nebraska. We were on our way, Dad and Mom was on their way to Sutherland because Mom was about due, and they got stuck in a snowbank, and Mom got out and tried to help push, and they got out of the snow, and they got into Thetford, and stayed all night with his aunt and uncle, and then I was born there that night. And Mom was sick, and the old doctor gave her teaspoons of whiskey or something. She got pneumonia, and she wouldn't taste whiskey till she was probably 80 years old.
What do you mean she wouldn't taste it till she was 80?
You couldn't get her to taste it. It made her sick when they fed it to her when she was sick. Well, that's what she told me.
Okay. What? They had a car in 1918?
I have no idea.
You said they got stuck in the snow.
Yeah. I suppose they had something, but they didn't talk about that. I never heard that.
But I mean, they didn't. Why did they take a team and wagon out to Wyoming when you were?
They didn't have cars then.
Well, that's what I'm wondering about. For instance, this picture.
Yeah, I know. I've never seen that picture. I have no doubt. It looks like a tent over the wagon.
Well, it's just a covered wagon, you know. It's got the hoops.
Well, but that's the covered wagon up there that we traveled in.
Well, that's a sheep wagon.
Well,
and maybe that's.
I've never seen this picture.
Maybe this was a sheep wagon
You must
too.
have had a negative you had printed, because I've never seen that one.
Well,
I know I gave you negatives.
but I mean, would they have had? Why would they have been taking cattle to Wyoming? Or maybe this isn't.
It isn't their cattle, it would be Keyline's cattle, I suppose. They took sheep, they took horses from Valentine for Grandpa Sanderson. Art and Bill, I think, took them up to Wyoming, and then they brought them back. They say, I don't know. Now, you got that thing turned on?
Yeah. But you don't have to be self-conscious.
Well, I don't care, but I want to know what you want me to do.
Well, let's just talk.
This is a story about Bill and Clara Sanderson. And it says William Henry Sanderson was born in Broken Bow, Nebraska, June 27th of 1892. He lived in Mullen, Nebraska, and Sutherland areas all of his early years. Clara May Humphrey was born in Sutherland, Nebraska, November 1st, 1896, and lived in Sutherland all of her early years. Clara graduated from high school in 1915. She taught school the fall of 1915 and 1916, and 16 and 17. Bill and Clara were married May 2nd, 1917 at North Platte, Nebraska. They lived at the Taylor Ranch south of Sutherland till the fall of 1917. Then they drove with Art and Grandpa Sanderson on this
Cattle. Grandpa Sanderson's cattle.
cattle
To near Ainsworth,
to near Ainsworth, Nebraska.
Who typed this, do you think? Who typed this?
I just had it printed. They got there for Thanksgiving. They lived near and worked with the Sanderson family through the summer of 1918. Francis was born January 21st, 1918. Grandpa Sanderson had gone to Wyoming. Bill and Art drove Grandpa's cattle or horses to Wyoming for...
Just a second, Sandy. Was Grandpa in Wyoming when you were born?
No, he was in Frederick, Nebraska.
Well, okay, and it's just the way that read, I wondered. Okay.
Bill and Art drove Grandpa's horses to Wyoming for him, but he and Art then drove them back. Bill stayed in Wyoming. He filed for homestead, but didn't get it. He got a job at Keyline's Ranch. Clara and Francis went to Wyoming by train, spent the summer there, 1919. Clara and Francis went to Sutherland by train, and Bill came to Valentine, Nebraska, and worked for the American Cattle Company. They lived on the Shaw Place north of Mission for a while during the winter of 1919 and 1920. In the summer of 1920, they lived southeast of Valentine by the Sears Place, where the petrified tree was. Bill herded sheep. Elda was born December 16th, 1920. They moved to Valentine in the spring of 21 and then went back to Wyoming by wagon covered by a covered wagon, but got no work, so Clara and the girls went by train to Sutherland, and Bill shipped the stuff and went back to Gordon, Nebraska, and worked for Irvin's Ranch. The first 1 mile west of Gordon, stacking hay that summer. Bill had a small place in town. In the fall of 1921, Clara and the girls went by train to Gordon, and they moved to the Irwin's Ranch. Bill trapped and Clara skinned all winter. They had 50 cents in their pockets when they went. Now wait a minute.
When you went out there.
Bill trapped. they had 50 cents in their pocket when they went out there. In the summer of 22, Bill farmed a small place. Frances broke her arm, and they picked cow chips and stacked them in the chicken house. In the fall of 22, Bill and Clara drove by wagon to Valentine to shuck corn for Grandpa Sanderson. They went back to Gordon in a snowstorm, and they kept thinking they were glad they had cow chips to burn when they got there. They later moved to the Berryman Ranch near Gordon, and Bill and Art worked for the ranch. Simon Vinegar and George Humphrey were to visit and worked at the ranch while there. After this, Bill and Clara went to Valentine and stayed with Grandpa Sanderson and the girls on the Sorensen place north of Valentine. In 1923, we lived in a sod house and later in the place Bill built next to Walter Hayward's place. This was all north of Valentine by Lamrose. Mm-hmm. Frances started school in Valentine, Nebraska in 1924. This spring of 1925, they moved to the Sorensen place, and Frances went to the Wood School for her second year. In the fall of 26, we moved back to Valentine to the McNeil house. Elda had started school in Valentine at 4 years old, but didn't like it, so quit. While
she wanted to go.
She wanted to go because Frances was. She started again in Valentine in 1926 at 5 years. In the spring of 27, the family moved to Gordon, Nebraska, where Shadron, Nebraska, where Bill bought hides, furs, and metals for the Norfolk Hide and Metal Company. We lived there till November of 29. We moved back to Valentine for Thanksgiving and lived in Denier's basement till February 22nd of 1930, when we moved to South Dakota onto the Gowan's place, 6 miles south of Mission. Bill worked for the John Batchelor on the Antelope Ranch and did farming. They lived there until 1936, when they turned the lease over to Frank Tea Shop. They then lived in Mission. Over the next years, Bill ran a few sheep in various places, and later Bill and Chick got liquor into Mission. After that, Bill and Clara ran the Mission liquor store until the city wanted a municipal liquor store, so they refused a license to Bill and Clara. The license was in Clara's name. Bill died in July of 74. Clara still sold her house to Laurel Bittner and moved to Winter on November 1st, 1980. She lived in the apartment across the street from Elda at 810 West 10th Street until they moved her stuff out in July of 1984 and gave
Moved it.
moved it to Rapid City, South Dakota. Clara went into the Meadowbrook Manor in Rapid City on June 27, 1984. Now, what do you want, Mike?
Well, I'm just looking here at 1917. They were Grandpa and Grandma were married in 1917.
Yes. Well, it says that here. I already said that.
What day were they married?
They were married May 2nd, 1917 at North Platte, Nebraska. And they lived at the Taylor Ranch south of Southern till the fall of 17. You got anything turned off?
No, it's still on.
Huh. And this is your Grandpa and Grandma Humphrey?
That's Clara's parents.
Yeah, let me just hold it there for a second.
That's Grandma and Grandpa Humphrey at Sutherland, Nebraska. And I have this that I said Grandpa and Grandma Humphrey moved to North Platte to a place 10 miles southwest of Sutherland, and that's where Clara was born.
When? 1896.
Yes, she was born in 1896, November 1st. They moved to a place on the hill just north of Sutherland for a little while, but to the west, and they lived there till Clara was 3 or 4 years old, and Murray was already about 1.5 years old, and Clara was worried that they wouldn't move her stick horse along with the furniture. They moved then to south of the tracks in Sutherland, and that's where they found a snake under their rocking chair when they came home from church on Sunday. From there they moved to the home.
Notable event.
From there they moved to the home west of town, west of Southern, where George and Katie were both born. As far as I know, they lived there the rest of their lives, and that was where Elda and I, my sister, liked going to Grandpa and Grandma's for Christmas and summer times. Their grandson, George Jr., still lives in Sutherland, Nebraska. Clara was my mother. I am now 98 years old, and I live in Echo Ridge Senior Apartment in Rapid City, South Dakota. May 28th, 2016. Both of these were written by me, but many years between the black ink and the blue, and I signed it Francis D. Clausen.
But I'm wondering about this typed up sheet. That was handwritten originally, wasn't it?
Well, Mom wrote it, but she gave everybody a copy but me. I was in Texas, and when I saw him, I said, "How come I didn't get a copy?" "Oh, you got one." And I said, "No, I didn't." So she gave me a piece of paper that was ripped off of some advertisement, and she had it on there, and she gave it to me. So I suppose I maybe typed it up then.
You were Mom, I suppose.
Wow, here's a really...
Well, I brought that. You don't get to keep anything I brought today, because then
I
wouldn't.
have that,
I
Mike.
know.
I have that.
Did you say you don't get to or you get to?
No, I don't get to.
Well, any copies can.
What do you want to know about it?
Well, I'm just going back here to the,
Rapiers.
up on Grandma Clara's side, your
Well-
mother.
Well, here's her father, Joseph Henry Ross Humphrey, born in Stanley County, Ohio.
Selby.
Selby County, Ohio, April
1863.
1863. Died December 2nd, 1945. Buried at Sutherland, Nebraska. And Louisa Katie Rapier,
His wife.
his wife, was born in Lee County, Iowa, May 29th, 1893.
1873.
73. Died September 18th, 1945. Buried in Sutherland.
Oh.
They were married at Madrid, Nebraska, October 3rd of 1895.
Okay, then your grandpa Joe's parents, Mary Elizabeth McCullough, born near Sydney, July 2, 1820, Ohio, Sydney, Ohio. Died September 14, 1900.
1906. That's
06.
what's on that quilt that I have.
Buried Sutherland, Nebraska. And then her husband, James Duane Humphrey, born New York State, October 3, 1811. Died January 3, 1880. Buried Marion, Illinois.
Maroa, Illinois.
Yeah. And then
George-
her husband was George Ray. No, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Grandma's
Okay,
father,
your grandma,
Grandma
Louisa Katie Rapier.
Lucy, they always called her Lucy. Her father was George Rapier, born in
Baden.
Baden, Germany, June 18th, 1838. Died March 22nd of 1914, buried in North Platte, Nebraska. And her
Catherine.
father, her Lucy's grandmother was Catherine Auenheimer, born in Germany, July 18th, 1844. Died September 2nd, 1907, buried in North Platte, Nebraska.
And then Mary Elizabeth McCullough's father, Archibald Livingston McCullough. Doesn't say what year.
Where are you seeing that?
Over here. Doesn't say what year he's born, but his daughter was born in 1820, so
1700s.
probably.
Don't know the mother's name.
Is this your writing? Is this your handwriting?
No, that's Mom's, I think.
Oh,
Let's see. Yeah, that's Grandma's handwriting.
and then down on Grandpa Sanderson's side,
William Henry Sanderson, born March 30th, 1828.
and that's his grandfather.
That was
Yeah.
his grandfather. And he's buried in Southern. He was born March 1828 and he died in 1908, buried in Southern. And we put a tombstone on his grave over a few years ago. And his wife was Jane Barnhouse.
Born September 22, 1835.
And died December 20th, 1917, born in Farmington, New Mexico.
Oh, buried in Farmington, New Mexico. And then Mary Jane Longwell. Who was she? That was Grandpa's grandmother.
Eliza's Jane was my grandma.
Jane was your grandma. So who was Mary Jane?
Her mother, I suppose. Her mother and father, Daniel Culber. No.
No, that's not right. They're two died in 1920. Mary Jane Longwell's ancestors were Holland Dutch, settled in New York. Their colony got run out there, and they went to Pennsylvania and settled in a colony.
That's,
And that's Mary Jane Longwell. And that's the one on the bottom, but I don't know who she is.
That one's mother, probably.
that's why my grandpa Humphrey
Yeah, maybe.
always said that I said I'm Norwegian, Scots, German, and Dutch. And Grandpa always said, and the Dutch don't amount to much. And then he'd laugh and say, because we were the Dutch that got run out of New York way back.
Norwegian, Dutch, Scottish, and what?
Norwegian, Scotch, Irish, German, and Dutch.
Scotch-Irish, yeah. Grandpa always said Scotch-Irish.
Me. Norwegian, Scotch, Irish, German, and Dutch.
Who were the Norwegian?
Dad,
Huh?
Sanderson.
He was Norwegian?
Sanderson.
Norwegian,
S-O-N.
and Irish.
He said, I'm Norwegian, Scotch-Irish, he always said.
Grandpa was German, and Grandma was full-blooded German. Mom was half,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm a fourth.
Scotch Irish.
Now, see, that one's name is Eliza Jane, and I think those Culvers are her parents.
You,
Sanderson.
so you mean,
That was Grandpa's mother and dad there, and her name was Eliza Jane. And I think that, I'm not sure, it just seems like Grandma always said her parents were Culvers, but I'm not sure.
well, why was Jane Barnhouse, or Eliza Jane, buried in New Mexico? Because her husband, William Henry Sanderson.
They never.
Oh no, here's the deal.
They never.
Here's the deal. Yeah,
Claimed
yeah.
it.
Jane and
You're
Eliza
right.
Jane are
I
two
was
different.
one generation off. Eliza Jane was the daughter of Jane Barnhouse.
Yeah.
Okay. 28. What the heck? Jane Barnhouse, born September 22, 1835, died 1917, and buried in Farmington. Okay, I see. Now I get it. So Grandpa Bill's dad's name was Henry Burdell
Henry Burdell.
Sanderson, and his dad was William Henry Sanderson. And then Grandpa Bill, his name was William Henry Sanderson
Yes.
too.
And Bill and his dad, William Henry, they buried the other William Henry in Sutherland, Nebraska. Dad was, I don't know how old he was, but he said he went and helped dig the grave and bury his grandpa. You're getting all of that on the picture, huh?
Well, I just wanted to show what we're looking at. Well, didn't Grandpa have an aunt or something that was born in Ireland? Didn't I always hear that there was an aunt that was born in Ireland and she used to smoke a pipe? Or maybe I'm thinking of somebody else.
This note says Rayfiers came from Iowa, Humphreys from Illinois, Joe's parents from Illinois. Grandpa Joe's parents came from Ohio to Illinois. He died in Illinois. They shipped their stock, furniture, and them rode in a railroad car to Paxton, Nebraska. I remember that, them telling that.
Who did?
Grandpa Joe Humphreys' parents. Humphreys, Joe's parents. Elizabeth
McCall.
and Joe came from Ohio to Illinois. He died in Illinois. So then they shipped their stock, furniture, and themselves. They rode in the railroad car to Paxton, Nebraska. Mrs. Rollerson was Grandpa Joe's sister from Aurora, Illinois. Grandpa Joe, born in Shelby County, Ohio, in 1863 and died in 45. At age 4, he moved with his parents to Illinois. In 1893, he moved to south of Paxton, married in 1895, October 3rd. Soon afterward, they moved to Sutherland.
So the Humphreys, were they German?
Yes,
And Rayfiers were German,
I would assume.
because George Rayfier was born in Germany, and so was Catherine Auenheimer. Auenheimer?
How do you spell it?
Looks like A-U-E-R-N Heimer. H-E-I-M-E-R.
Auern. Heimer. Auenheimer. Rayfier. Well, if I'd had time to take these notes that I found and put them all in order. So Grandma was born in Iowa, and Grandpa was born in Ohio.
Now, is this your handwriting? Right there?
Probably. This, but
Yeah,
Not-
this
not
is
that.
right. Is this your writing? This down at the bottom?
this right here is,
No, that's Grandma's.
no, that's my writing. This would be Grandma's, but not this right here.
Francis Dill. That's so that.
That's
Looks
it.
like Grandma's writing. I mean, it all looks like the same pen. Although, is this?
Well, I print. See, this is my writing. That's my writing. This is all my writing. It probably is.
Anyway.
Yeah, I suppose this is. Yeah, I copied this off of that piece of garbage that Mom gave it to me on. I
What,
could
you
hardly
mean-
make it out.
You mean this is all you're writing?
I guess so. God, it's awful. But it was just not too many years ago that I made this copy, so it wasn't as good a writing as I used to do. Yeah, it's my
That's
writing.
that's your.
Yeah, it's my writing, but I was just making notations.
And you said that was Grandma's writing, but it isn't.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, where in...
Are we turned off or on or what?
Oh,
It's on.
It's always on. Didn't make any difference.
Where in the heck is what?
Um, you don't remember anything about Grandpa Sanderson having an aunt or a grandmother, maybe, that came from Ireland? Let me see this. And is this something that, this type thing here, is that what Grandma wrote up?
Yes, you get. Well,
And these two pictures are dated 1917. Grandma and Grandpa.
well, I have my mother Clara's high school graduation certificates. She graduated in 1914 from the 11th grade. That's as far as Sutherland School went.
Yeah.
And then that summer, the school board decided they could scrape up enough money to put on the 12th grade. So she went back and did the 12th and graduated in 1915. So I have both 14 certificate and 1915. And they're big things like, but they're so heavy paper and been folded so many years that you can hardly get them open. I've always felt like I should have taken them to southern Nebraska, and my cousin still lives there in town, and my Aunt Myrtie's husband Murray passed away years ago, but she left 2 sons. And one of those sons, my cousin, was on the school board for a few years. I should have taken those certificates and asked them if the school board would have been interested, or if they had a show place where they could put an old certificate of the first class, 12th class that ever graduated from there.
Yeah.
And that was Sutherland?
Clara Humphrey from Southern.
No, I mean, and here's the picture of Grandpa and Grandma, probably.
That's Bill and Clara.
Right. Sometime before 1920, I would guess.
Yeah, I don't know. When Mom wasn't one to explain things or talk about it, really. She and Dad would get to talking about Wyoming, and I would hear it, but it wasn't that they made a special explanation to me about all of it, when and how and where.
Well,
But I remembered a lot of things that I heard them talk about.
like what?
Well, a time in Wyoming, and Mrs. Keyline was in the garden one morning. They had a home in, I think, Gillette, but they sometimes spent a lot of summertime on the ranch. And she had a garden, and I came out of the house onto a little flat platform outside the screen door, and she heard the screen door slam, and she looked up, and I came out of the house and backed up against the screen door and stood there. And she said she went on hoeing, and in another minute she looked up, and I was still standing backed up to the screen door, and she thought, well, that was strange because I never stood still that long. I was 2 years old or 3 years old. 2.5, I suppose. And so she walked up there to see what I was, just standing straight against the screen door. And she said there was a big rattlesnake coiled about 3 foot from me on the wooden platform. He was looking toward me, and I was staring at him. And she yelled for one of the cowboys down at the ranch house or the barn or somewhere. She said, come and bring your gun, and come now. And he ran up there and shot the snake. She told me that story, but of course I don't remember anything about that.
Well, here's a picture from the Keyline Ranch that Grandma had.
Yeah.
Strings of horses.
And then,
Well, I remember they used to tell me that they'd go out and chop out a wagon load of coal out of the side of a hill somewhere and haul it back to the ranch buildings. And now you say there's a coal mine out there.
oh yeah, big coal mine. Here's a couple more pictures from the Keyline Ranch. There's this one.
Well, I never saw that.
Well, I know, but
Mhm.
did
Maybe
you
that
ever
was
see
the-
those?
Maybe that was the bunkhouse or something.
Did you ever see those Angora chaps that guy's wearing?
No. But Dad always said he used to have some.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those chaps that he's wearing looked to me like, I think they're the same chaps that Grandpa's got on in this picture. The three-legged horse picture. Remember that?
I remember the picture. Well, this was Grandpa's cousin.
Yeah, and Grandpa's
Horses.
wearing Angora chaps there.
Mm-hmm.
But the horse is kicking
Yeah.
one hind foot, so
Yeah, he just kicked his picture right off of it.
so Grandma always called that the three-legged
Yeah,
horse.
yeah.
And then here's a picture on the Keyline Ranch of guys branding.
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, Dad was head of rounding up the stray cattle when it came branding time. And Mom was the cook. And they'd go out with this covered wagon, and she cooked in that wagon out on the prairie, and there'd be a bunch of cowboys, and Dad was the head of the deal, the boss of these cowboys that was helping him round up the cattle.
Well, maybe that's what this picture is.
And they
then.
would cook in that camp, in that wagon, covered wagon, and feed them out there.
Well, and that's probably what this is.
And they all slept on the ground in
Bedrolls.
But for some reason, I thought.
But how they would all eat, I guess they'd just go in and get their food and go back out and sit outside and eat it. Because they couldn't all get in there. It'd be,
Looks to me like they're sitting there eating right when this picture's taken.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of looks like, that makes more sense. For some reason, I thought Grandma told me or something that that picture was going to Brown County.
but
This is a neat picture. I like that.
who was that?
Just somebody breaking a horse. And it's at, I'm sure it's at Keyline because it was with that bunch of pictures. But see, the guy is, you can see his shadow down there. See, this guy has just gotten on that horse, or else he's
Well, the
getting
horse,
ready to get off.
the
or
horse
something.
doesn't look very wild.
He's got a hold of the horse's ear.
Oh, yeah.
That's the way that they used to do it. They'd grab an ear.
It's like-
They called it earing them down. They would take a hold of
How
that
do you
ear.
know that? Who told you that?
Oh, that's just old cowboy stories. But I can see he's got his hand
Yeah, he
on.
does.
He's got a hold of that horse's ear, and I can see that he's in a round pen or a round corral. That's not a
Could
square
be.
corral. That's a round corral, and that's what they use for breaking horses. And you can tell by the looks of this horse. I mean, that horse is standing there about ready to blow up, but the guy's got his hand on his ear.
If he was,
You don't reach down and grab a horse's ear when it's broke. That's when it's a bronc.
he might have been just picking a bug off of him.
No, I don't think so.
Well, I don't know. I could tell you something else about when they were cooking. I remember Dad said one guy got kind of smart about, I guess they were supposed to, some of them would come in and sit down, but how could they sit down to eat? So I don't know, but he said, this guy said something about, where am I gonna sit? Or there's no room for me to sit or something, and Dad said, threw him outside and told him, take your plate and go outside. You don't need to sit, you can go out there and eat. Because he expected Mom to get a chair fixed for him or something to sit down, and Dad didn't like that, so he threw him out of the camp, but then they couldn't all be in there to eat anyway, so it never made sense to me.
Well, maybe that was at the ranch.
No, they were out in the, where she was cooking for the bunch. She didn't cook at the ranch. They had a bunkhouse for the crew, and they had a cook. And
How do you know she didn't cook at the ranch? I thought she did.
no, she just took care of me. But she cooked when they went out to round up the cattle that they hadn't seen since last fall, and they didn't know how many calves they had out there. Round up and get them branded, I suppose. So have we done all of this? I think so.
Well, this says, Louise Katie Rafier Humphrey, born Lee County, Iowa, May 29, 1873. At the age of 11 years old, she moved with her parents to a homestead 12 miles southwest of Paxton, Nebraska. Here she grew to womanhood and taught school several years. At an early age, joined Methodist Church and was faithful member to the end. Married Joseph Humphrey on October 3, 1895. Soon afterwards moved to Sutherland, married at the house of her parents in Perkins County, Nebraska. And then you wrote, I think, well, it says this was my grandma H. Humphrey, and she was always known as Lucy. I think you wrote that, maybe.
Yeah, that's my writing.
Then it says Joseph Henry